This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions out of Manning, South Carolina. Sincerely thanking everyone for tuning in again to part 3 of Ego, the Beast Within, entitled Rise of the Serpent. If you have listened to part 1, that is super. If you've listened to part 2, that's even better. In part 2, we began to talk about the three traders. If you would go back to part 2, we have the audio files up on the 19 Report website. That's www.the19report.weebly.com. And we also have the video up on the 19 Report website. If you would go to that same URL address, and when you get to the menu, you just click on the menu bar and it will drop down to Ustream. When you go to our Ustream site, you will be right where you need to be on the page for part 2 and part 1 of Ego, the Beast Within. Today we want to get directly into Ego, the Beast Within, part 3, Rise of the Serpent, because in part 2, if you have not been able to identify the three traitors that are within each individual, if we have not been able to identify those three traitors, then we will begin to start rising upward, if you will. But we're rising upward with knowledge of both good and evil, but we have chosen to be represented by knowledge of the evil. So we are at that point today. We're talking about Ego, the Beast Within. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions again. We won't be taking in phone calls today because there's just so much to cover. So Ego, the Beast Within, part 3, we will start with the reality that the reality of God was left behind in the garden. Again, God is still in the Garden of Eden. After being expelled from that holy place, man was exiled into the wilderness. Man was exiled into an illusion of life. It's not the real life, but it's whatever we make out of it. So we use the phrase, life is what you make it. So we're in an illusionary stage of life at this point. And we're in a place where impulse and emotion controls the three brains that we talked about in part 2. Pay very close attention to what's being said, because it has to be said without being said. But if you pick up on it, then perhaps by God's permission, we will begin to understand a little bit better. The most important part of what is being discussed in this 4-part commentary is the fact that the serpent was with man in the holy place by God's permission, and that the serpent's job in the holy place was to see if the thoughts of man were so contrary to God's thoughts that if God allowed the opportunity for rebellion, would man accept the opportunity to do whatever he felt was right for him? Would man knowingly go against God? That was the trial. And unfortunately, we accepted the offer. And yes, we went against the idea of a higher power based upon what Satan said. Satan whispered into the ear of man and said, God doesn't want you to know what he knows. Now, the dangers of going contrary to God's law is that if we are successful in our venture of personal thought and actions, we can now be tried and found guilty of conspiring against God, plotting against the Creator. Now we read the biblical account of Adam. We read the biblical account of Jacob. We read it in the Holy Quran. His name is Yaqub. Jacob in the Bible and Yaqub. The scientists who made moon and the results of his rebellion against God. We're reading about all of these people in history. The scientists who made the moon, his rebellion against God, as well as the tribe of Shabazz and the many Egyptian gods and goddesses that we read about, that we laud over, who went contrary to the God. And we are allowed to test their wisdom in real time. So now we're testing the wisdom of Jacob. We're testing the wisdom of Shabazz. We're testing the wisdom of all of the gods and goddesses of old. We're testing that in real time. Now, at this point in 2003, it has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt by the results of these wise ones that we've tested their method, that all of their wisdom has failed to eradicate evil from within the earth as well as on it. So we are still in a mental evil state. We're talking about the serpent, ego, our ego, internal thought. We talked about the macrocosm and the microcosm, and we're talking about that inner demon that, if fed properly with the proper evil, will become something bigger than that. So we're talking now about the rise of the serpent. Still, we choose our leaders. We want the person we want to be in charge. We choose our source of belief as we root for our side, if you will. We want our person to be successful, the person we choose, regardless of if he's right or if he's wrong. If we've put our heart into it, that's what we want. We want our man who to have the last word. We could care less about the salvation of the masses of the people. That is not what religion is about today. It's not about the salvation of the masses of the people. Religion has been made to be a competition. If you're over at Greater Missionary, you saved. We got all of this stuff. Look at how blessed our members are. If you're over here at this little church and they're not doing so well, then you're in bad shape over there. So where you need to be is with us. But God is one God. God is the creator of all things, and he made one religion. And in the Bible, he says that we say that Abraham is the father of religion, and Abraham was just in submission to God's will, which is the same thing with Islam, means one who submits his will to do God's will. So we could care less about the salvation of the masses of the people as long as they are going contrary to our thing. And in that madness, that mental meltdown causes us to disconnect from the God force. If Jesus Christ is truly who we follow, then his example should be our blueprint for living. He never judged. He only condemned what God said to condemn. And even while he was hanging on the symbolic cross, he asked his Father to forgive the tormentors who were tormenting him because they had no idea what they were doing at the time. So even in his worst hour, Jesus was asking God to have mercy on those who did him wrong. How do we behave in our worst hour? We pray that God kill everybody because we are not mentally and spiritually equipped to handle the force that is pressed against the mind, the force that is pressed against the brain in order to bring about something better than what is. Now, with us, we are ready to condemn anyone who isn't a Christian. This is true. When Jesus never called himself that, never called himself a Christian. We think everyone should burn in hell except for us if they don't follow the Christian way of thinking. And Muslims think the same way. Everyone should burn in hell if they don't follow the Muslim way of thinking. And God says that he made us into different tribes and different families so that we would know one another or love one another and not hate one another. So in our madness of thought, we're talking about the serpent rising in the thinking of man. We couldn't be further from God if we tried. Yet we are being blessed and we're getting rewards for our doing. So we think that we are with God. In actuality, most of us are not. So God leaves us in our squalor, in our sin, in hopes that we will see the error in our ways and desire to return back to the straight path. Unfortunately, many of us still want universal control over ourselves, even though we are not capable of mastering this machine called the human body, this machine called the human mind, or this machine called the human spirit. All three of these forces are in danger of becoming animalistic, and the majority of us are leaning towards satanic. So we tune into the gods of old is what we're doing today. We conjure up spirit forces that are made to tell us exactly what we want to hear. This is a dangerous game that we play, a very dangerous position to put ourselves in, because these forces may very well be that same serpent-minded force that whispered into the ear of Eve and convinced her that God didn't want her to become a god like himself. So many of us begin to engage in certain practices that we begin to see and hear things that tell us you're better than them. You know, you're royalty, you're great. You need to question these forces. Now, I know this is a little higher than most people are accustomed to going when pertaining to things like this, but this is a part of it. This is a part of what the ego causes inside of man. This is a part of where the confusion comes in with man when he begins to talk to quote unquote the spirits or the hierarchy of the spirit realm. He begins to hear things that convinces himself that he's the one. And he begins to act as if though he is the one. This is ego being built, ego being whispered into the mind, the hearts, and the spirit of man. Now we're walking around here talking about, I'm God, I'm a God, or I know I'm saved. My thing is, where is your proof? That is the question of the day. What have you created? A God is a creator. And if all we do is consume what someone else creates, then we're not a God. Let's look at some of the examples. We consume what people produce. Then we are nowhere near being a God. So we ask, who prints the money? Who gives us jobs? Who gives us welfare? Who takes us to the hospital when we're sick? Who sees us there? What schools do we graduate from? Our cameras, our cars, our houses, our materials, YouTube, Facebook, the internet. Who created these things? Where are these people who say that they are gods, are saved? Where are they in that scenario? Where are they in that equation? They're not creating anything. They're not producing anything. They're just users of what someone else produces. And if you are a God or God-like, then you become a creator. So we need to begin to digress a little bit and think about what we say before we say it. So we have knowledge, and knowledge is a dangerous thing. Knowledge is a test to each man. When you get that knowledge, what will you do with it? How will you present yourself? And this is the gap between student and street person. The college student says, I got knowledge. You're nothing to me. You're a peon. So you're beneath me. So I separate myself from the street person, and I begin to think I'm better because I have worldly knowledge according to the school curriculum. And that's the way we are in religion. I know the Bible. You don't. So you a sinner. We begin to make these separations between us. We're talking about ego and the rise of the serpent. And the serpent is beginning to rise because of the way we think, because of the way we act, and because of the way we handle situations. So knowing or having knowledge is a very dangerous thing. We want to know who creates these things. You can't claim credit for what people did in the past because you didn't do it. You can use those things. You can build on that and say, well, I improved on a product, but you are not the builder of it. So to all of those who always want to go back, the past is a great place to go and learn, but you always want to go back and talk about the people of old and what they did and why we should build and why we should not build off of what they did, but actually live based on what they did. And the fact of the matter is that the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Mayans, all of these great people were destroyed, not because they were all bad people. They were destroyed because they did not eliminate that seed or that germ of evil that is within each person. Because the higher we go up, if you look into the Bible, it's all talking about Pharaoh this, Pharaoh that, king this, king that. The more knowledge we receive, or the more we think we know, the deeper we go into sin, the higher Satan rises, and the more we want to take not only control of ourselves, but control of God as well. So we claim credit for what black people have done. Black people, we do that all the time, but we didn't do it. And you don't know how to duplicate it. We can only sit around and impress people with our knowledge by talking about what has already happened. And talking about a thing is nothing if you're not doing anything about it. So Allah didn't want man acquainted with these forces in our infantile state of mind, because he knew that we would use these forces as a devil and not as a God. Remember Yaqub or Jacob, and remember all of the pharaohs and kings and rulers who tapped into the God power. They all had to be destroyed because they became so cocky in their childlike state of knowledge. As great as they were still nothing in the eyes of God. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions out of Manning, South Carolina. We're talking on part 3 of Ego, the Beast Within, and trying to catch up with my rhythm because there was so much stuff going on. As I said, we have so much to do that I have to focus on all these things. So I'm trying to catch my rhythm. We're talking now about these great pharaohs and kings who have been among us in the past and why they had to be destroyed. And in Isaiah 6:4-4, we'll see this. All of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous acts are like filthy rags. We all shrivel up like a leaf, and like the winds, our sins sweep us away. This is talking about all the people of old. All of your great people had something hidden that perhaps God hid it to protect them from man, or perhaps they hid it and others hid it, but no one is free from sin. And as long as that sin is rising up with God, then that sin is among the righteous, and that sin is in the minds of man, and that sin has to be made manifest. So when it's manifested in the physical form, You see it in the form of people, our children, and thoughts being acted out. So we're talking about the ego and the rise of the serpent. Now at this point, the little serpent has grown into a wicked power. He has strength now. He has force. His control is now not just that of one man, Adam and Eve, or one woman. His control is of nations. And while in the Genesis, it tells us of Adam and Eve's expulsion from the holy place. Watch this now. Pay attention. It tells us in the Genesis of Adam and Eve being expelled from the holy place. But it never said that God expelled the serpent. The serpent was allowed to remain among the righteous because he still had a job to do. In every book of the Bible and the Quran, the actions of the serpent are addressed and warned against. And in every race of people who have walked upon this earth, there are some among them who hide Satan in the midst of the garden, in the midst of the three brains, in the midst of the three minds. We want to hold on to that satanic force, protecting his identity from the unlearned masses of the people. As a result of our hiding sin and not expelling it, we guarantee we guarantee the serpent a hiding place in our three brains. So among ourselves, we protect this devil that we claim we want out. The devil is a liar. The devil this, the devil that. What the devil are you talking about? Because all of us are sinners. All of us are doing something contrary to God, but we don't point out our wrong. We just point out other people's wrong and hide ours. But the wrong is still there. And because it's there, it's going to be made manifest in the actions of the people. We will not allow this satanic force to disintegrate or die a natural death within us. We are constantly hiding it. And the only person that can identify it at this point, because the serpent has become so powerful, the only person that can identify the serpent at this point is God himself. So we read in the book of Job where he says, "Whence cometh thou, Satan?" He was walking with the righteous. We're talking about thought. We're talking about ego. We're talking about the mind and how it has tricked us into thinking that we are these great, righteous, and holy people, when in actuality, we complement Satan's rule. Let's look in Proverbs 28:13 in the New Century Version. And as I said before, I'm not a preacher. I have no desire to be. But if you are in the South, you got to come with biblical knowledge, or you won't be even listened to, or you will be debunked before you have a chance to open your mouth. So it's always important to have biblical knowledge. As I said, we read a lot of different scriptures, and we want to present these things when we find them, because you never know how long you're going to live. You never know how long you'll be on this earth. So share what you have. If they don't listen now, maybe they'll listen later. Proverbs 28:13 in the New Century Version of the Bible reads as follows: "If you hide your sins, you will not succeed. If you confess and reject them, you will receive mercy." Now, we're hiding our sins, but apparently we are succeeding, because all of the evil, all of the wickedness is being rewarded in this world. So our children desire to be wicked. Our children tattoo themselves up. Our children sell drugs because we did it. It looks like the success comes to the evil people. Our children go to church, but in church, they do all the filthy things that they did in the street. They just do it in the name of God. Very few people are free from those sins. And this is why all of your major ministers and pastors will be made manifest. God is going to expose them. Not that you don't believe in what they say, because they have some value, but you have to begin to understand that man is flawed. And these flaws have to be corrected before a new kingdom of heaven can come about. We're talking about the ego, and we're talking about rise of this serpent that is within us, that is controlling us, that we can't see, that we don't know exists, that we think is outside of us. We think it's some big computer called the beast. We think it is these entertainers who throwing up hand symbols and signs and gestures. We think they are in control, but the control is within you. Because Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you. So if the kingdom of heaven is in you, the kingdom of hell is there as well. Now we're going to look in Jeremiah 16:17 in the New International Version, published in 1984. This is God talking. "My eyes are on all their ways. They are not hidden from me, nor is their sin concealed from my eyes. So God is seeing it all. To everyone who thinks they're getting over, you're fooling the masses of the ignorant people, but you're not fooling God. This is why the world is continuously going downhill, because people are continuously hiding sin, trying to get sin into the holy place. And God will not allow that to happen. In the Message to the Black Man, this is a book written by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He tells the same story that I'm talking to you about right now. And he tells it so eloquently. He tells the truth of why the manifestation of Satan had to be put before our face. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about this made man being expelled from the Holy Land because he was causing so much trouble among the righteous. Then he goes on to say that not all of the unalike people were expelled from the Holy Land because some of the righteous people hid them from the authorities. Some of the righteous people hid the people that God wanted out of the Holy Land. They hid them. Why did they hide the unrighteous people in the holy city? Because they liked them. And I'm quite sure that many of them thought that they could reform them. Now the question remains, did Satan want to be reformed? And the answer is no. So by the time that Islam is brought to us in North America by Master Farad Muhammad, the question is asked, why does Muhammad or any Muslim murder the devil? And the answer is given, because he is 100% wicked or evil. This is no different than what is in the scriptures in the Bible. The devil has to be expelled. God says your sin will not be allowed into heaven. But we say we're going to get that sin in there somehow. So that serpent that has been slithering throughout the Garden of Eden in the book, that same serpent is slithering throughout us, mind, body, and spirit. And we're trying to get some form of evil up to God so we can continue to do that evil. Even if it's done in private, it's still being done. Now, I want to make this absolutely clear at this point. To murder the devil does not mean going out and killing people. I want to say that again. To murder the devil at this point does not mean going out and killing people. To murder a devil means to disintegrate the thought from within our psyche by identifying the source of the problem and gradually getting rid of it. If you only kill that physical part of it, then the energy just finds another host and it regenerates itself into a new idea or into a new form of evil, a new method to get over on the masses of the ignorant people. And if we are the host, we are the host of that evil. We are the carriers of evil thought. So we are guilty of conspiring against God and assisting the serpent by hiding him in our thoughts. Not only that, but we are trying to get him into heaven. We're trying to get into heaven with the serpent riding piggyback. Most of us don't want to go to heaven if we can't take the devil with us. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions out of Manning, South Carolina. Sincerely thanking everyone for tuning in to part 3 of Ego the Beast Within. And I apologize a little for that rough beginning, but the rhythm has to come. The feeling has to come. And when you controlling all this stuff, you kind of go off a little bit and you have to catch yourself. But by God's permission, we got it together and we are trying to put over the idea in part 1, part 2, now part 3, Satan rising. In part 1, we have neglected to look into the thinking that is within us. We've allowed it to grow. We become successful in our evil. So now the satanic mind is rising. And this is where we are now in part 3, rise of the serpent. So the serpent is gaining strength because of us. Now, generation after generation, the seed of the serpent has grown in the minds of our children. Now we're to the point where every insane thought is acted out by someone, somewhere. Rape, robbery, murder are all the orders of the day. It's right in the minds of our babies when they're born because the sperm of the father and the egg of the mother had mental defects before the child was even conceived. So around the age of 6, so teaches the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our children start to manifest what is most dominant in their thinking. Around the age of 6 years old, it's when the trouble starts. In part 2 of this commentary, we discuss the 3 traitors, or the 3 brains that are most active in every human being: the mind, the heart, and the sexual desires. We just talked about what happens or is happening in the minds of our 6-year-olds. And for further clarification in this, I wanted to quote a few of the developmental skills that are forming in the minds of 6-year-old males and in 6-year-old females. As far as motor skills, they may still be somewhat uncoordinated and a little gawky, able to learn to ride bikes. They can move in time with music and beats, so they're getting rhythm. In terms of the language and the thinking development, they're moving toward more abstract thinking, creativity. As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said with Yaqub at the age of 6, he looked up at his uncle and said, when I get older, I'm going to make a people to rule you. So that rule is still going on, but that creativity was in the mind and is in the mind of our children at the age of 6. Now they begin to develop reasoning skills, shift from learning through observing and experiencing to learning through language and logic. Now they want it all. It's difficult to separate one thing from another. They want it all. So a child at the age of 6 wants it all. And if we don't help them to balance that brain, they're going to want it all. And with the evil that is in them, the first thought that they will entertain is the thought of evil. How can I get it? By lying, by cheating, and by stealing. In social and emotional development, we grow more independent, yet feels less secure. We crave affection. We crave friendship. We need to win at everything, even if we got to change the rules, even if we got to cheat. Pay attention to what I'm saying. We may be hurt by criticism, so we build an ego now. We can be rigid, demanding, and unable to adapt. Do it my way or no way. Increasingly aware that others may have different feelings. So at the age of 6, we are almost fully developed. So from birth to 6 years old, the ego is developing into a functioning entity. In the book of Genesis, it states that God rested on the 7th day, which implies that he completed the first phase of development or the first phase of his work in 6 days. We're talking about 6. We're talking about the mindset of our children at the age of 6. We're talking about God creating something in 6 periods and resting on the 7th. Why would he rest on the 7th? In order to rest on the 7, you have to be pleased with the 1 through the 6. Stay focused. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions out of Manning, South Carolina. We are talking without talking. Hint, hint. So you have to be focused by the age of 6. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about this one called Yaqub, or John in the book of Revelations. Now this Yaqub that is talked about in Message to the Black Man, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said is the same person named John in the book of Revelations on the island of Patmos, getting ready to make a whole new people. This whole new people is a manifestation of the thoughts that were inside of the old people. And since we hid those thoughts, God says, as I read earlier, I know you're thinking, I'm going to manifest your thoughts to you and let you see how evil your thoughts can be. Now, that may seem terrible, but in actuality, that is a mercy from God for him to do that. So he said that by the age of 18, Yaqub or Jacob or John had completed all of the universities in Mecca, Arabia. At the age of 18, he was finished school. He also stated that by the age of 18, our children should not only complete high school, but by the age of 18, they should be graduating from college. And that the educational system, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the educational system, and I'm paraphrasing, this is not exactly what he said. The educational system has been designed to prolong the process of mental development, which gives our children too much lag time in between learning, which in turn causes boredom, disinterest them, and they make them have the inability to focus in class. So we are facing a period now where everybody got ADHD, everybody got attention deficit something. And this, in my humble opinion, is a real disorder in some children. But in most of the children, it is just that they are not being challenged by what they're given. They're being taken too far off the course of what they need to learn. And if you ever go to Central Carolina Technical College, I don't know who the dean is now, but I really put that on the table to them that I don't want to go through all this stuff. I want to get directly into this computer major and do this thing. I don't want to go all the way off course because this is boring me and I won't stay. I said this. And this is how our children think. The classes are boring to them, so they have nothing to look forward to that inspires them to want to go higher, with the exception of rap music and the streets and things of that nature. And on the flip side of that, a lot of our children who are more calm in their thinking want to do church, but they want to be a preacher at, early so they can get all the glamour and stuff that goes along with that. So now we have a 6-year-old child who has questions and concerns that aren't being addressed. Listen to me. At 6 years old is where we are. At 6 years old is where our children begin to want to know what's going on. Why am I feeling this way? Why is the world the way it is? Why are people treating me the way that they're treating me? And unfortunately, we don't have the answers that they need. So these questions are being addressed, and they are forced to figure out life literally on their own. Then we put them in front of the television and we tell them to learn based on what is being projected to their psyche. So as I did as a child, we learn how to count from a monster. They learn how to behave from a sponge. And they learn how to lie, cheat, and steal from Nickelodeon. Incidentally, as Brother Abdul Muhammad said in a broadcast on NOI.org, the first part of this name, Nick, is an old name for the devil. The devil was called Old Nick. Santa Claus is called Saint Nick. So all of these things are into play when we have a child from 1 to 6 being nurtured by Nick, nurtured by satanic thought, nurtured by their own ego, because we are not able to handle them. So we don't know how to nurture them through this stage to the age of 6. Now they can't rest at 7 because the mind is too busy. And the book says that God rested on the 7th day. Let's see what's going on with this now. We're talking about Rise of the Serpent, Ego, the Beast Within. This is part 3. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to leave them on the website. Or you can leave a message on my personal phone, 803-460-4532. Don't call me with anything outlandish or crazy because I do have tracking on my phone. Who doesn't? Now, by the age of 12, they are locked into a socially programmed behavior. The ego is in control. All of this is by design. So by the time the child gets to the age of 12, they are totally out of control. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know. I lived it. Now we have from birth to 6 and from 6 to 12, 2 stages of development that answered the whispering of the serpent. So at 6 years old, we were raised by the devil. From 6 to 12, we're raised by the devil. This is the Satan rising part in the title of this broadcast, the title of this commentary. Now, my oldest son at the age of 12 was a straight A student. My middle and youngest sons by the age of 12 had given up on school and learning as a result of their egotistical thinking, what they don't want to do. Neither one of my two, the middle or the youngest two, graduated from high school. They didn't graduate. They didn't complete it. My oldest son, by the age of 18, had gone from being a straight A student to being what we call that born again rebel. He, you say you're smelling your underarms, you think you know everything. And while he did manage to complete high school, and I was proud of that, he dropped out of college. Now they have been programmed to think that that our guidance and our wisdom is outdated. So whatever we tell our children at this point, from 6 to 12, from 12 to 18, they say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and then they go do what they want to do. We're talking about the rising of the serpent. Now they have been programmed to think their parents' guidance and wisdom is outdated. So whatever we advise them to do, they do the opposite. This is not something that just in your house. This is by design. We can get the whole human family together and discuss why this is happening. And since this world is contrary to God's world, the ego is constantly encouraged to act out its desires. So every time we say, if you keep on going where you're going to get in trouble, something in this world proves us wrong, because this world is based on evil itself. So evil is always rewarded. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotions out of Manning, South Carolina. Thanking everyone for tuning in again. We're going to try to get through with this. Now, Yaqub graduated from all of the universities in Mecca, Arabia, by the age of 18. 6, which is the first stage of development, divided into 18 evenly 3 times, which can be evenly split into 3 6s. Pay attention, because we all looking for this beast. We all looking for him. Oh, where at? I'm going to show you where he is. We are talking in depth about ego. This is part 3 entitled Rise of the Serpent. The subject matter of which this third installment derives is ego, part 1, the beast within. Now I turn your attention to the ultimate rise of the serpent in the book of Revelations, where the serpent of Genesis has been fed so well throughout biblical history that he has morphed into a dragon or into a beast. So in Revelations 13 and 18 of the King James Bible, it reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666." Now, for anyone who has any knowledge, you know that this is not the only allegorical story that you can tell about what those sixes mean. I'm trying to be careful with my words. But this is a true story. This is our children. And this beast is made manifest out of our hidden actions that the serpent in the garden plucked out of Eve. He got it out of her, and it manifested where it could be seen. And now that same serpent has turned into a beast, and everything that he puts in front of us, we want to do it. So we're going to get in one day into the Bible where we talk about those 10 commandments, but in actuality, there are so many more. Even in the Bible, it talks about not sleeping with the chicken or sleeping with the dog or sleeping with the birds, because all of these things we now desire to do. So Yaqub had an agenda at the age of 6. He knew what he was born to do. So by the age of 18, he started to make a new people who would rule the entire world for an appointed length of time. Yaqub knew what he was doing. Now our children, on the other hand, are products of an illusionary experiment that led them down the path, the wrong path at birth. Our children, us, our parents and grandparents, we're all in this illusionary world. It doesn't even really exist, but it's happening right before our eyes. Message. Their parents, which is us, and our parents and their parents, even as far back as time itself, we carry within us that thought of rebellion. Yaqub was allowed to manifest that rebellion so that we could take a look at ourselves in real time to see if this is what we really wanted to become. So this man that Yaqub was allowed to create on the island of Patmos or Pelon in the Bible, this man that Yaqub was allowed to create in the message to the black man, this man that is being created in the ego, the beast within commentary that I'm showing you. I'm showing you a satanic thought being manifested into a satanic action from a satanic being. So count the numbers of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. That beast is me, that beast is you, but most of us will not take responsibility for our beastship. So we cast that off on other people who do things externally that we hide and do. Okay? Many of us don't want the kind of life that we are living anymore. We don't want it. We don't want to be the people that we are. But we don't know how to break the magnetic pull of sin. In the book of Genesis, God rested on the seventh day. If we can keep our children on the straight path, I wanted to emphasize this. And I'm going to go back over that. In the book of Genesis, God rested on the seventh day. If we can keep our children on the straight path by God's permission until the age of 6, on the 7th year, they will be able to see much clearer without the illusionary haze over their eyes, having knowledge of self. By the age of 12, if we can keep them on the right path by God's permission, on the 13th year, which is the second 6 of the 3, mental development can be so clear that they could begin to develop wisdom at 13 years old. As that wisdom continues to develop properly, it will develop into understanding of the time and what must be done. The process of reversing the magnetic pull of Satan will have reached the 18th year and the third 6. So if we can make it through the 6 to the 7, make it through the 12 to the 13, and make it from the 17 to the 18, by God's permission, our development at the age of 18 will determine our status at the age of 19. If we develop right, we begin to rise into Godship with the Most High. If we develop wrong, we rise. But our rise leads to the path of destruction. And that's why the world is in the shape that it's in, because people are confused. How can this thing be wrong when they get so much success from it? But it is a crooked rise. So 19 represents two things, both life and death. Or, as our Christian brothers and sisters say it, as the 5% family say it as well, you live to die so that you can die to live again. And my Christian family says it like this: you are born again. So when we are able to make it through the hardships, make it through the trials from 1 to 6, and from 6 to 12, and from 12 to 18, on the 19th year, things will begin to make much more sense. But something is put in our pathway that stops us from even beginning the journey properly. Something is put into our psyche, into our three brains, that won't allow us to even see life and see the world for what it really is. We're talking about the rise of the ego. The serpent is rising now. And as we have said, he is turned into a dragon or beast, because all of our negative thoughts, we hid them as we went to the top. And once we got to the top, we let go of all that evil, and you begin to see what a person really is. Okay. So my Christian family says that's being born again. Now, Jesus died and was resurrected in 3 days. 3 times 6 equals 18. So 3 stages of death to rise again and become one with the Creator. One verse after the end of chapter 13 and 18 begins Revelations 14 and 1. So from where I read from chapter 13 to 18, and one more chapter in the book of Revelations in 14 and 1, there are 18 verses in chapter 13 of Revelations. And if you add the one verse that begins Revelations 14, that will make that 18, 19. So at the end of this trial in 18, we're coming into a new thinking in 14. And Revelation 14 will bring us right where, by God's permission, we want to be. And Revelation 14 says, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion," and it says Sion, "and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads." So I'm hoping that you all will join us on next Thursday, God willing, for this final installment. We have one more to go, where we will answer the question, who is able to make war with this beast that came from ego, the beast within part 1, and grew ego within part 2, and we are now in ego, the beast within part 3. Who is able to make war with this beast? Join us next Thursday as we will complete this commentary and tell you who that person is that is able to make war with the beast. It's you and me, but we need some help. We need some priming in the pump, and that person is right among us today. You call him Jesus. We have many different names for him. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan will be doing a 52-week broadcast on YouTube as well as on NOI.org, entitled "The Time and What Must Be Done." Now, most of the people here in South Carolina could care less about Louis Farrakhan. Everybody have their opinions about him, but I sincerely hope that this message will reach somebody somewhere, that at 6 o'clock on Saturday we will tune in to NOI.org and listen to what Minister Louis Farrakhan has to say about the time and what must be done. His words are they are a compliment to what, by God's permission, I was trying to do here, because his words are wisdom, words of wisdom that will bring us out of this illusionary thinking and put us into the mind state of one who actually knows the time and knows what must be done, and will be given an opportunity to judge what's happening and act based on what is happening. And as long as we don't accept a wise counsel, as long as we dodge around that, then the suffering in the world will get worse. because Satan is rising in the minds of man, and people are being murdered, slaughtered, plotted against, eliminated, experimented on. All of these things are happening. We are depressed. We are suicidal. We are thinking of rape, murder, anything that can come to our minds. We are going mad. And God is going to allow it. And you and I won't be able to control it, because no race of people from the highest of the ancients were able to control that madness. And so to anyone that is a 5%er, if you Kemet or whatever you subscribe to, Christian to the highest level, Muslim, Mason, Shriner to the highest level. All of these things have been tried and they have failed. Our best leaders put forth their best effort, but they were not successful at eradicating Satan from out of the mind of man. We want to take Satan to heaven, because if we can't take him, we don't want to go. And since our desire to stay in hell is so strong, we're going to end up here. And it's going to get worse than we've ever seen before in our life. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotion, sincerely thanking everyone for tuning in to the 19 Report, Ego, the Beast Within. I wanted to go over this diagram again because I had it up and I took it down because, people get so superstitious about things. You think this is some type of Illuminati something. And get your mind out of that and get your mind on yourself and trying to figure out what's going on with ourselves. But in this diagram, we've talked about part 1. And we've talked about the 3 traitors, or the non-believers, and these 3 traitors being within us. And we talked about this little serpent, this little eye that whispered to the hearts of men and caused us to act upon what was already in our hearts. So that serpent has gone up, up, up to where we are right now in the book of Revelations. And that serpent has become a dragon. And the main reason that serpent has become a dragon is because of these 3 individuals that reside within each of us: the me, the myself, and the I. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotion, sincerely thanking everyone for tuning in. Apologizing again for the rough start. But I hope that you will continue to pass on this information. But it is very difficult to do so much and try to pump yourself up to deliver a message or deliver commentary and deliver it with enthusiasm. It's very difficult to do. And I'm grateful to do it. And it's therapeutic to me because it's allowing me to see that I'm not pointing fingers at you, but I'm actually talking about myself. And so in everything that I write, it's a breakdown of what I am inside. But by God's permission, I'm able to say, yeah, that's me. I'm in bad shape. And ask for the help and guidance that we need. We're not going to figure this out on our own. We've tried already. We've been given opportunities to do it. And always somebody comes out on the lower end of the stick. There's always a hierarchy and somebody down in the mud that cries out for help from God. And as long as someone is crying out for help, God is going to answer in his time. This is Brother Johnny of Groove 19 Promotion, sincerely thanking everyone again for tuning in to the 19 Report and for tuning in to part 3 of Ego, the Beast Within, entitled Rise of the Serpent. Why are our children born mentally dead? I hope that something in this broadcast has really helped you, and if it has, then please share the information. Again, next week we will be back on, and please, on Saturday, the time and what must be done. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan live on YouTube, live on NOI.org. And if you want to go to the 19report.weebly.com, I have a link on my Ustream page that will take you directly to hear the message of the man, in my opinion, who has solutions to the problems of today by God's permission. Thank you again.